And there was tremendous amount of ice around for the time of year. But this ship's been at it for 40 years. There's nothing new going through ice floes. And that's what we were doing, just pushing through ice floes. I was in my cabin, port side, at the bow, above the waterline, and simply couldn't, this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep because of the noise of the ice. So I was just about to get up when the call came from the captain. There's a long alarm bell. And the captain just came and said, this is a real emergency, it's a real emergency to muster stations.
Mm. And what goes through your mind at that point? I mean, are you in disbelief?
I dare say that there's that, but action is needed. And we sort of really well drilled at this. You don't work for 10 weeks down there, without having it in your mind what to do. So you just pop to loo, have a pee, have a glass of water, put on your warmest clothes. You don't take anything, although I did find my pen drive, which had all my photos on. I managed to put that in the pocket, and some hand warmers, which Mandy had got me, so I thought those could be useful. And you just go up to muster stations, and obviously the whole thing happens quickly, and you've got to act, and you're focused, or need to be focused. So there's no panic, there's nothing like that, you just keep focused, go to muster stations.
And was there anything that would indicate to you that something was awry? Awry? Were there any sort of extra noises or any motion that would indicate something had happened?
Yeah, I mean, there was continuous crunching, but that was punctuated by a loud noise of a kind I hadn't heard before, which felt like it affected the momentum of the boat. But obviously, the experts will tell us what happened, hopefully. I can't say we hit an iceberg, nobody really knows. I can just explain what I experienced.
So you all got to the muster stations, yeah. You were there, and could you see anything? Could you see in the darkness what was going on? No,
as you say, it was dark actually, 1 o'clock in the morning, although it's a short night, it just happened to happen in the night. And there was no indication of anything really, just a few passengers were saying that they'd seen the water. In fact, they alerted the captain, and a sort of damaged recce party had been sent down to assess it, and we were just getting feedback that there was a hole in a cabin below the waterline, size of a fist, and that water was coming in. That was all we knew at that time.
So that was the actual size, just fist size?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Keri, if that was the only damage, I'd be surprised, because they seemed to contain that. And the pumps went on immediately, of course, as did the Mayday go out, and so on. The captain, over the first hour, continued to tell us that the water levels were under control. And obviously I was very concerned, as everybody was at the time, but I wasn't extremely concerned, because I felt that, and we were getting the feedback, that the ship should be able to cope with an incursion like that. The actual conditions on the boat were, for the first hour, okay, but it started to get a little bit hairy thereafter, because the expedition team all sort of looked at each other. We noted that the boat was beginning to list, and we'd gone to 5 degrees, and then we went to 10 degrees. And when we continued to list, I knew that this was not a good situation, and I would say my concern level rose to very, very concerned at that stage. And then just things started getting worse. Obviously water had got into the engine room, and perhaps the scariest moment for the passengers was when we had a complete blackout. The engines just stopped. There was a blackout. Some of the passengers had been asked to go downstairs to the level below to collect some belongings, and they were just plunged into the dark. The emergency generator came on, so we then had some light again. But the trouble now was that we were increasingly listing, and the boat was without any power, and we, frankly, were not in control of our destiny anymore, and that was a very critical moment. And then things got worse again. The list may be now 20-25 degrees. There was an iceberg, a very substantial sized iceberg, drifted into the side of us. Now, it wasn't the momentum or impact of that that was the worry. It was that it lodged itself on the starboard side. And the problem was, being half the length of the boat, that then effectively made 2 lifeboats redundant, which left us with, that's the starboard side, which left us with 2 lifeboats on port side. They had the capacity for 80 people. We had 150 people on board. Now, the passengers didn't know this, but the expedition team and the captain knew this. And at that moment, there was a genuine possibility of mass loss of life, and we were aware of that.
And did anybody broach the topic of that?
We certainly did not bring this up with the passengers. They were in the muster station, and this could have tipped a few. I mean, there were some very nervous faces. Everyone obviously looked anxious, but one or two more so than others. But luckily, although later on the strong currents were to give us serious problems in the rescue, the strong currents did dislodge this iceberg. But it was that moment when the captain, who subsequently spoke to me about this, said that he had no option but to abandon ship, and we were now at 30 degrees list. But this was an opportunity to get everybody off whilst he could. If we drifted into ice floes, we wouldn't be able to launch lifeboats. So the incredible happened. We stood there and we heard the captain come on and say, abandon ship, abandon ship, abandon ship. And then you just knew this was it, we were going over.
And what thoughts go through your mind at that point?
Well, it's serious, life-threatening. You speak to any Coast Guard, even in the perfect rescue, which actually this, in a sense, looks to have been from the outside, that with 150 people there would be fatalities, there would be a few, something will go wrong, someone's going to slip into the water, and you've got 2 minutes max down there. And getting someone in with hypothermia, heavy body, limp body, is difficult. And so this is in your mind that we're probably going to lose a few people. Please don't let it be me. Stay focused and just try and assist yourself and obviously everyone around you in getting into the lifeboat. I mean, after all, I'm a member of the expedition team, so you do still have responsibilities, and the passengers do look to you. I mean, they're looking at you, they're looking at the expression in your face. How are you looking? Trying to read, how should we feel? So you try to keep a focus and keep, not necessarily cheerful looking, but just helping them to feel as okay as they can. And, we got in the lifeboats, and then when I'm in the lifeboat, I'm just obviously hoping that all the maintenance has been done properly. And there were some problems in getting the lifeboats down, but eventually we were the first one in the water. We got in the water. And that's when you realise that the water that doesn't look too bad from 50 foot up is actually quite choppy. You've got force 4, choppy water, we're taking a bit of spray. It's not too bad, but the wind's cold, and the spray is not a good thing. You just don't need your clothes to get wet. So all this is sort of running through your mind, and you're waiting for the engine to start, and then the news came that the engine on our lifeboat was defunct, it wouldn't work. And you just, honestly, Keri, you're beginning to think, can this get any worse, So it then became a matter of trying to release the lifeboat and get ourselves away from the hull. You've got to get away from the main ship, obviously. But then there was problems even in releasing these hooks, and the hooks are something like 18 inches, big, massive chunks of metal. When they were released, they were just flying around everywhere at head height. And just, we all know on Scilly what can happen when something like that hits a person. So we're screaming to everyone to get their heads down, getting everyone to cover their own heads, covering one's own head, at the same time trying to get the lifeboat away from the hull. And the only way we could do this by now was with the oars on the boat. So using the oars to try and push the boat away, it wasn't working. Using the oars to try and row the boat away, it wasn't working. An oar snapped, so there must have been quite some exertion going into using these, because oars are fairly strong things. But I believe that probably something had happened in the currents. We suddenly found ourselves away from the hull, which was a relief, because we actually had been for about 5 minutes underneath the other lifeboat, preventing that from being launched at that time. And we were hoping, and we didn't know, that they knew that we were there. We didn't want a lifeboat launched on top of us, so all the usual screaming, don't release and all that stuff. But that was a relief. But then the next thing is, there you are in an open top, very relatively small, wooden, frail lifeboat, and you're just drifting. We've got no engine. We should have had an engine, and we're drifting towards the ice floes. And this is obviously extremely concerning. If we'd gotten the ice floes, then clearly we'd have just been crushed, and that would have been it. So at that point in time, I mean, again, you're trying to remain focused, you're trying to look at opportunities, see whether there's any way in which we can improve this situation. But the miracle that then happened was the captain managed to get the engines going on the main ship itself, which then meant that they could launch the Zodiacs, which are inflatable ribs. And that single thing certainly saved the lives of many of us, because the Zodiacs then became like tugs. The Zodiac drivers came alongside, because three of the lifeboats were drifting, only one had engines that were working, came alongside, tied themselves to us, and then towed us away from the ice, towed us into the wind, so that we weren't taking on too much sea spray, and obviously minimising the effect of the wind. So after about an hour, we were stabilised in that sense, and then we all put on these life-saving body suits, which were, again, incredibly important. I mean, prior to that, my feet were numb. I couldn't feel them. As soon as we managed to get these suits on, which was difficult in a small boat with 70 people, but everybody helped everybody else, and zip them right up to your neck, and then you could feel your toes start, you could feel them again, you know. So clearly these were very important in stopping hypothermia.
Did you feel huge pressure to become a leader of people, to be calm and collated when you felt turmoil inside?
The thing is, by this stage, we're now broken down into teams of 6 in a lifeboat, where you're sat around with each other. And the amazing thing is that just everybody is there to help everybody else. You know, I mean, 2 of my 6 were being seasick, because this was a different kind of motion than they'd been used to. I mean, one other guy, to put it bluntly, shit himself, you know, and that sort of stuff. And it was those things were going on. You had to look for the vulnerable, and those who were not vulnerable at that moment to help the others. And then, if you were having a bad moment, you know, perhaps people could see that you hadn't spoken for 5 minutes or so, and someone would say, "You all right then, Bob?" You know, and so it was just like teamwork.
Do natural leaders emerge with these sort of things? I mean, when you watch the disaster movies, is there always somebody that kind of takes command?
I think to some extent that's true. I mean, there were 2 out of our 6 who were probably the most important in terms of keeping everyone else going. And, you know, like when people are being sick over you and that sort of thing, just make sure they got water to drink, because we don't want dehydration. Just tell them it doesn't matter, you know. I mean, I remember sort of saying to this lady who's being sick, it's just not an issue, because she kept apologising for being sick. She said, look, it isn't an issue. It isn't an issue. And another guy was saying, right, this time tomorrow we're going to be having a beer. Yeah, somewhere or another, you know, and it was that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, there was a certain amount of natural leadership that came out.
Did you have lots of different nationalities on board?
Yeah, totally cosmopolitan.
So that must have brought challenges anyway, with language difficulties?
Certainly did, especially with the Chinese-speaking people. On earlier parts of the expedition, you know, we'd had certain problems in communicating things with them. But there were also those people who just hadn't got a concept of what we were trying to do, turn up in muster stations in pyjamas, you know, and then we had to try and sort them out. Some didn't have any footwear, and they just had no comprehension of what was potentially about to happen. So there were communication problems and lack of understanding. But again, you know, being a relatively small group of people, we were able to resolve the problems. But there we were, sort of like an hour in, and actually things, it was a strange thing, because then things went quiet, all the action sort of finished, you're being towed, and that was the moment that you sort of became a little reflective. And as I was saying to Mandy, there was really only 2 thoughts going through my mind at the time. One, clearly this was a life-threatening situation, we might not make it. We knew that there was a boat 10 hours away, but also Antarctic conditions can change in no time whatsoever. And in fact, 2 hours after we were rescued, we were in 40-knot winds with a whiteout blizzard. So, you know, although the experts say we had 10 to 12 hours in a lifeboat in terms of the warmth that we could generate, we actually only had, beyond the rescue, in another couple of hours, you know. So I knew all of this, and I was just focused, and I just thought, well, I don't want to drown, you know. and I had a life vest on, and I knew I wouldn't drown. So I thought, well, what would happen if I went in is I'd just die of hypothermia, and it would be a couple of minutes. So I was thinking, well, that's not too bad. I mean, it sounds stupid, but you're facing death, and you just think, well, that wouldn't be too bad. But the other thought, obviously, is always your family, and you just think, God, you know, how sad that would be to leave your family behind. And I would imagine that most people were having those kind of thoughts at that time, but still focused and not giving in, and knowing there's a boat on the way. And as I say, you know, just got to maximise your opportunities. Every minute that you get through is a minute closer to a potential rescue.
The press reports referred to jokes being made amongst the British contingent about the Titanic. Whether that was true or not, I don't know, but that would, I suppose, identify the sort of thing, the British almost gallows humour sometimes you get. I mean, did you find if those jokes were bandied around, did that create difficulties with the other nationalities who might not really get the British thing?
I mean, there was a certain amount of joking. It's a way of relieving pressure, of course. I mean, you laugh and you feel better. But I don't know, in all honesty. I suppose as I say, various nationalities seem to cope with this in a different way. And the British, well, we know what the British are like, you know. And well, there was a great moment actually after the rescue. It was sort of British orientated, and then we were being taken to the Chilean base, and that was quite a major operation in severe gales, trying to get us off the Nord-Norge, which was the rescue ship. And there we were all in our immersion suits and things like that. And Colin, who's a Canadian but a very British Canadian. And we've got the captain on board, the expedition leader, the expedition team, and Colin just suddenly shouts out, "Never mind, Brian, worse things happen at sea." And it was incredible. Spontaneously, everybody started singing "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life," and I thought that was so British myself, and that was like a highlight, really. And even the captain, a Swedish guy, much later on, just said that he will never ever forget when we all burst out into this song.
So how long did it take, the whole process, from as soon as you got to the master stations to getting back on dry land in Chile?
Well, we were 2 hours to abandon ship. Then we were 4 hours on the lifeboats. After about 2 hours, we saw a helicopter, and that lifted morale. Somebody knew where we were. We knew. And then word got round that maybe the ship was 5 hours away. I don't know where that came from, but in the end, we were only only 4 hours. It's a fairly long time in the circumstances, you know. But 4 hours, and the rescue itself, which was hair-raising, must have taken about an hour, all told. And to be honest with you, Keri, that was the time when we could have lost someone. You know, you got strong currents, you got choppy water, you got rising winds, and you got moving vehicles against each other, and you're trying to get people from one vehicle to another and then on to another. And I saw 3 incidents where people nearly went in, and that's what the lifeguards are talking about, you know, when there's fatalities. But anyway, we got on board, and then we were told we were being steamed down to the Chilean base, and that probably took about 4 hours. And when we got there, we couldn't land for 8 hours because the conditions were so appalling. It was a blizzard, there was a whiteout, 40-knot winds. So we were probably about another 8 hours as guests of the Nord-Norge before the expedition leader decided we were going to make a go for it. The conditions were... You'd never go out in those conditions normally. But, you know, we could put people in immersion suits and close the distance down so it was only about a 20-minute Zodiac drive to the shore. And we felt confident with the Chilean people at the other end helping us that we would be able to get people off. So you add all that up, you know, you're talking about probably 14 hours, something like that.
We were talking about it in the office, yeah, just about the things you'd have to deal with, the aftermath of it, if you like. And if you leave your possessions behind, were you concerned when you actually got to dry land about things like passports and documentation?
Yeah. Well, the purser we'd had 2 hours, and they went for the absolute basics, and they got the passports. See, every individual has to hand in their passport, because we leave Argentina, and then we're visiting various lands where you need permission and passport stamps. So they very thoughtfully brought the passports along. But the one thing which bugged me a bit was I hadn't had presence of mind to put my cards in my pocket. I was a bit concerned. And as it turned out, without cards and, of course, without a mobile, it actually, although a lot was done to get us home smoothly as possible, without those two bits of equipment, if you like, it made the task very difficult. You're so used to be able to use mobile to communicate, to ring people up, say the flight's delayed, the flight's cancelled, just get your credit card out to pay for whatever, and you didn't have that. But we were given some pocket money, and it was enough to get us home for as long as nothing went wrong with connections. So, but yeah, I mean, all your possessions left behind, but you don't really care that much.
It's going to be an interesting conversation. You probably had it with Visa or whoever cancelling your card, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Mandy did that for me, but yes, well, where is your card, sir? Well, it's at the bottom of the Bransfield Strait, and we don't think there's any danger in, any forgery or anything like that, yeah. I mean, there is a bit of incredulity. People do find it difficult to believe the story.
Yes.
I mean, for example, I was in the airport at Madrid on the way back, and I was desperately trying to get through for a connection, and I asked these people, I said, look, I really need to get this connection. Do you mind if I go ahead in the queue? And they sort of looked, scowled at you, and sort of a bit like this, as people sort of tend to. And I said, look, did you hear about MS Explorer? So I made a call on my situation first time. I said, did you hear about MS Explorer? And they said, yes. I said, well, I was on it. And then the chap sort of tapped his wife on the shoulder, and they sort of moved away from me, as if I was just stringing along or not telling the truth, or some kind of weirdo or alien. And the 3 times I mentioned it, actually people were very peculiar about it, and I think probably disbelieving, to be honest with you. But then I can understand that, because in all honesty, I can still hardly believe it myself.
Have you thought about who's going to play you in the inevitable film?
Well, it was dramatic, but maybe not that dramatic. Yeah. I'll play myself.
And do you think it's time for a new hobby?
Nope, I'm signed up for next season already.
You're going back?
Sure.
You won't have any qualms about that?
I've not got a problem. I mean, I said to Mandy, if she had strong feelings about it, then obviously I'd take those into account when I went. No, but if Mandy had been very concerned about it, but that's not her. She's great. She supported me in everything I do, and that's why I've been able to live a life with interesting things like this, because she's always supported me. So, I'll be going next year.
Okay. Well, you've got quite a few thank yous to broadcast.
That's it, yeah. Well, thanks for that, Keri. I mean, it's actually mainly from Mandy. Scilly is always at its best when there's a crisis, and everyone comes round and helps. And I personally thank everyone who was in touch with Mandy, which was many, many people, too many to mention. And Mandy in particular would like to thank all of those people that rang, but in particular Jojo, who offered to come round when Mandy was watching the thing live on TV, not knowing what was happening. Ash, Nigel and Danny for the phone calls, and many others. Higo for popping his head round the door even when he was working. And Jo Wrigley, she came and sat with Mandy during the rescue on telly, which was very, very important for Mandy. And also for Lynn and David, who, friends obviously of ours, very much so from Sports Mode, who took Mandy out for a meal just to try and take her mind off it.